Welcome to our talk on the labor market. Now, I want to kind of give you a perspective on where this chapter lies in the grand scheme of things. Previously, we've been talking about the free market system, right? So let's look at the pyramid. At the basis of everything we've talked about is economics is the study of choice. And you can't make a choice unless you have a goal. And that's the top right here. And the goal we set for ourselves in this class is profit maximization. And we talked about economic systems. That's the environment in which you make your choices. We talked about supply and demand, which is a vital part of the free market, which is a part of every economic system. We talked about elasticity, we talked costs, and then we type everything together through market structure. And we asked ourselves a very simple question. How does a firm that belongs to an industry with a specific market structure, how do they maximize profit? So we looked at a firm in a perfectly competitive industry. How do they maximize profit? Then we looked at a firm in it's all by itself, a monopoly. Then we looked at a firm that's in an oligopolistic industry, and we looked at profit maximization in terms of market structure. What we're going to be doing here is and by the way, a firm to maximize profit by producing a rate of output where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. In other words, profit maximization, no matter what market structure you're in, was a production decision. You produce a certain rate of output that maximized profit. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be doing a very similar analysis, but instead of looking at production maximizing output, we're going to be looking at hiring in terms of maximizing profit. How many firms should a firm hire to maximize profit as opposed to production? And so when we look at labor supply, we see that labor supply is very much like the supply of a good or service, right? In terms of it's the willingness and ability of a person to work specific amounts of time at alternative wages given a certain period of time. And when a person works, it comes at a cost. The more you work to earn income, the less leisure time you have, right? So the opportunity cost of working is the amount of leisure time that must be given up in the process. So remember, with basic economics, as something becomes more and more scarce, it becomes more and more valuable. So as you work more and more hours, leisure time becomes more and more scarce, therefore it becomes more and more valuable. Higher wage rates are needed to compensate for the increasing opportunity cost of labor. So think about this. As you work more hours, you have to be enticed with higher pay to compensate you for the fact that leisure time is going up in value because it's becoming more scarce. So the marginal utility, now utility, that's a fancy term for satisfaction. The marginal utility of income may decline as you earn more. And so the upward slope of an individual labor supply curve is a reflection of this phenomena, which is increasing opportunity cost of labor as leisure time declines, and the decreasing marginal utility of income as a person works more hours. That's a fancy way of saying when you need wages to go up to increase the hours worked. That's L. So you need to pay people more to get them to work longer hours. You move along the labor supply curve. That's why it has a positive slope. And that's what we can see here. At wage 1, you work Q1 hours. If you increase a person's wage, that increases the incentive to work Q2 hours, and you move along the labor supply curve. Now, this is what I find very interesting. The labor supply curve does have a normal looking supply curve, upward slope, right? But there's also an interesting aspect of the labor supply curve that may not be apparent. It actually has what we call a backward bend. Higher wages represent more goods and services, thus induce people to substitute labor for leisure. This is called the substitution effect. This is a fancy way of saying that when firms offer workers higher wages, they're willing to substitute labor for leisure in order to work more. And so if you go up to a worker and say, hey, I want you to work a few more extra hours, and they say, I can't because I value my time off. Well, you say, well, what if I offer you a higher wage rate? Will that be enough to compensate you for your loss of leisure time? So that's, in other words, you're substituting labor for leisure in this case. And that's what gives the upward slope of the labor supply curve. But will workers always respond this way? A worker might also respond to higher wages by actually working less. Think about this. Once you work more and more hours, guess what? Your income increases, right? Well, what if your income increases to the point where you're satisfied? In other words, you have enough income to satisfy all of your basic needs, and you basically have enough extra income to do some luxury things. Well, now if you're offered a higher wage rate, you actually may reduce your hours worked and still maintain your level of income. This is called the income effect of wages, where an increased wage rate allows a person to reduce hours worked without losing their income. So if income effects outweigh substitution effects, an individual will actually supply less labor at higher wages. So let's take a look at this. Here's the normal sloping part of the demand supply curve, right? As wages go up, so does hours worked. Now, I want you to look at this wage rate right here. Let's call this W star. At W star, you work L star. Now, if you take the hours that you work, L, multiply it by the hourly wage rate, that's going to give you income. Now, let's say this level of income right here, L times W, is the income that you want to maintain. Now, if you start getting paid more than W star, what you can do is you could actually reduce your hours worked and still maintain the same income. So as this goes up higher, this starts to bend backwards. And that's the income effects dominating. So let's take a look at that. And this is the backward bend. So for lower wage rates, the labor supply curve has a positive slope, but once you go above a certain wage rate, it has a positive slope. Excuse me, negative slope. This is a negative slope. This is a positive slope. And I sometimes refer to this point right here as the lazy point. Why do I call it the lazy point? Because once wages go above W star, you start to respond by working fewer hours. So what we're going to be talking about in the next video are some issues that make the backward bending sub-labor supply curve less than realistic.